Good morning, everyone. I guess we can start now.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, so I hope I am audible clearly and screen is also visible.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So as planned in the last session, we'll be going ahead mostly with the .NET Core and deep, understanding the architecture and setting up the applications, their configurations, etc. This also includes the discussion and implementation of collections and generics in .NET, and then we shift our focus to .NET Core. So, which begins with introduction, then .NET Core architecture, then introduction to ASP.NET Core platform, its architecture, and then the implementation where we will see how to set up the ASP.NET Core application, then understanding middleware, setting middleware up, and then understanding and implementing the application configuration with the help of JSON file for a .NET Core application. Precisely, ASP.NET Core will be our target here. I mean, the example application will be ASP.NET Core application. And the framework that we'll keep on using is .NET 5 only. Okay. So let's start with collections and generics. So again, these are two different topics, though related to each other. But first, we need to understand collections. So if we talk about collections, where does it start? At the very basic level, can I say it starts with the concept of arrays? Very basic type of collections are actually represented by arrays. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
What are arrays?
A list of elements or list of objects.
Collection of same data type means elements with same data type or different data types.
Mostly when it comes to the definition of arrays, it contains the members of the same data type only, right? Homogeneous elements you have, right? Yeah. With .NET and Java, you get the data type called as object, which allows you to put data of different types as well. But if you look at the top level type, it is actually represented as object. Before using it as integer or character or float or string, ideally you have to get it typecasted. If you don't do that, it remains and behaves as object only. Yes or no? So that way we don't break the rule. Array contains only homogeneous type of elements. Yes or no?
Yes.
Right? So can I say arrays are actually homogeneous collections?
Yes, you can say that.
What else? Arrays are immutable.
Mutable.
Immutable means if I've created array of size 10, I cannot reduce its size. I cannot increase its size. If any requirement like that comes up, I have to get the entire array recreated. And probably I need to have some code which copies the data to the new array. Am I right?
Yes.
Now, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? And how do we decide that?
No, it's not a good thing.
In most of the cases, I can say it's not good, but there would be some cases where this might come as a benefit also, where we want to have a fixed number of elements to be accepted. There, arrays could be good. They contain homogeneous elements, so the processing will be much more faster. The casting will not be required at all because casting also engages the CPU, right?
Yes.
But such kind of requirements are pretty less in modern day applications. In modern day applications, you usually work with unpredictable type of data, unpredictable amount of data as well. Correct?
Yes.
And there the immutability can be a disadvantage. Every time recreating array means new memory allocation needs to be done. Old memory allocation needs to be deleted. It is actually going to waste lots of CPU time and the related resources. Am I right?
Yes.
Creating object actually takes lots of efforts at the hardware level. And when we are talking about array of objects or array in general, it will be much more costlier, not in terms of money, but in terms of efforts and time and the CPU usage, right? Plus, you will be using memory as well, as the array needs to be declared in memory, correct? So every time recreating, deleting is going to be very, very costly. Especially if the size of that array is on higher side, it will be even more costlier, correct?
Yes.
Which will have diverse effect on your application's performance at the end. If not directly, there will be indirect impact. Yes or no?
Yes.
So that is where, for modern day requirements, we needed a solution which probably overcomes this issue. At least this immutability to start with, right? That is where we got some actual collection implementations, which are completely mutable, means they are dynamic. Their elements can be dynamically added at any point in time. Their size can be increased, decreased. You can think of the data structures like a linked list, where the size of linked list is not fixed. And if it needs to be manipulated, it need not be recreated. You just create a node and attach to the existing linked list. It can be insertion, it can be append operation, it can be remove operation, anything. Yes or no? Your linked list can grow, expand or collapse at any point of time without putting extra efforts or extra load on your CPU and related resources. Yes or no?
Yes.
Now here, if I talk about the built-in types provided out of box by .NET, what are they? Any collection that you know already? We have used one, list. So it all starts with something called as array list, in fact. There is array list, then there is stack, there is queue, there is hash table, and then there are different types of linked list also. Now, linked lists are used not directly within any application, but very specific requirements where maybe you are working on building some sort of framework. At the application level, most of the time, these are the collections that you will be looking at to be used. Am I right? What is
That's
array
right.
list? What is array list? Just like an array, it contains sequential elements, not necessarily placed on contiguous memory blocks, though it is a preferred mode, but it's not guaranteed that the contiguous memory blocks will be allocated for the elements of the array list. It will have some sort of linking between the elements, so that if you traverse one element and if you're looking to traverse another element, you have some sort of link or the path created. Understand? And this can be used just like an array also with subscript operator. In one example, actually, we did that with list class. Yes or no? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, so this can be a direct replacement for arrays. Wherever we are looking to work with arrays in a mutable format with minimum efforts and minimum change in code, if we want to do that, the array list could be the option. Understand? That's why the name is array list. A list which behaves like array. Is it clear?
Yes.
Now, what is stack? You guys must be aware of some algorithms for which the acronyms are something like LIFO and FIFO. Last in, first out, and first in, first out, right?
Yes.
What last in, first out means? The element which goes in last will be processed first. The element which goes in first will be processed at last. So probably that's where we think of a stack. Like a container placed like this, where item 1 is placed, item 2 is placed, 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7, and so on. While processing the elements back, I have to always start from the top. Just like a stack of books. To retrieve the to retrieve the first book, I need to remove all the books which are kept on the top of it first, so that none of the book faces any damage. Yes or no? So whatever element that is put into the stack, that is done with the help of an operation called as push. And when you retrieve it back, at the same time you are looking to remove it as well. That is done with the help of the operation called as pop. Push into the stack and pop from the stack. If you are looking to retrieve the topmost element but not remove it from the stack, in that case, you go for another operation called as peek. Correct?
Yes.
Very, very known kind of stuff. A data structure called a stack which provides this behavior, right? And that's pre-implemented here in .NET by the name of the class called as stack. Similarly, for first in, first out, we have something called as queue, which probably you can think of like a pipeline. Wherein the data is moving in from one end and coming out from another end. Let's say these boxes are representing your data elements. So whenever you put in something into the queue, it just pushes the remaining elements forward. And the element always stands at the back of the queue. Correct? And this is why we say first in is processed first, or first in, first out. Yes or no? Usually this in operation is represented by something called as NQ operation. NQ means put in queue, and then for out operation we have something called as TQ. Means take the first element out from the queue. Correct? This is the behavior provided by a out of the box collection type or data structure called as queue. A class called as queue already exists. We need not create one. Is it clear?
Yes.
Next is hash table. What is hash table? Hash table usually you can think of as a key value pair. You can imagine a virtual table here with two columns and multiple rows, where the first column is key and the second column is value. You want to maintain some objects which can be identified uniquely. Their unique identification can be represented by key. It manages the state in such a way that the key cannot be duplicated, though the value may be duplicate as well, right? So whenever you have this requirement of storing the data which is in key value format, you go for what? Hash table.
Hash table.
And then there is another data structure called as sorted list. This is actually hash table only, which is by default sorted in ascending order of key. I said this is hash table only. So structure is like this once again, but it is by default sorted on the key column in ascending order. This is sorted list. If you have a requirement like that, instead of hash table, you can go for sorted list. These all classes come from a common namespace named as system.collections. Is it clear?
Yes, right.
Yes.
Let's see the implementation of all of these with an example. So let's open Visual Studio. I'll take a new project. Console app. Next. Let's name this as CS underscore demo collections. Next. .NET 5 is the framework. Create. Let's remove this console write line statement from here. And as we are going to work with the collections, I said those are all provided by the namespace system dot collections. We have to import that. Done. Let's create a static method over here that doesn't return anything. I'll name this as demo array list. And get this method array list, demo array list called here in main. What this demo array list does is creates the instance of array list class. Let's say I name it as ARR equals new array list of, let's say, 3 elements. If I don't provide the capacity, by default, it takes the capacity as 4. I say ARR.add1, ARR.add2, ARR.add 3, but I want my element to be of string type, THREE3. Then I say ARR.add 4.0D for making it double. I mean data type as double. Array list count is ARR.count. Most of the collections will have count property, comma, capacity or size is the other property, capacity, size, length. These all are the other property which actually talks about what is the total capacity. Let's say for now, for display purpose, I use the term size. And what I want to display for that is ARR dot capacity. The catch is I created a array list of what size? 3. So how many elements ideally should be there in ARR? Not more than 3, right?
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes.
In that case, this statement which tries to add 4.0D must fail. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
If it is array, it is going to fail for sure. Let's see what happens with array list. Right here, I say for each object E for element in ARR console.writeLine E. I want to display all the elements in that array on different lines also. Maybe here I can put a slash n to create some extra blank line in between the two outputs, right? And let's start. What it says, there is no error first of all. I created an array list of the size 3. I added fourth element. The moment the fourth element got added, the size automatically got doubled. That's the default algorithm Microsoft has put in. If the collection is full and a new element is being added, just double the size of the collection and create more space. Now, why this is important is because if you're adding one element today, you might want to add more elements in future. So it just goes ahead and gets the memory allocation done. Now this custom collection class, how do we create? Here we need to understand how these classes are created. All these classes actually are inherited from the abstract class called as collection base, and also implement an interface called as iCollection. So whenever you create a custom collection class, you have to do the same thing. Your collection class needs to be inherited from collection base and need to implement iCollection interface so that it can be termed as a .NET collection, even if it is a custom collection. Do you get it?
Yes.
See, here it says size is 6, which means the size or capacity has just doubled because there was no space for this 4. Am I right?
Yes.
Actually, how many elements have been added? 4 only. So whether it is the add method or insert method, you have added total 4 elements only. So count it shows as 4. And then the for each loop displaying all elements. 1, 2, 3, 4. One more thing to be noticed is it contains heterogeneous data, not homogeneous like arrays. Because at times when we are working with modern applications, as I said, the data types are also not predictable. I might be receiving data of any type in any format. So I need to be ready for that. Correct? See what type of input add method takes. Whether it is add, whether it is insert, whether it is remove, all are going to take the parameter of type object only. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Now, the data type being object means practically I can pass elements of any type. So it overcomes the limitation of array in both ways. Instead of homogeneous, I can have heterogeneous elements in any array list. At the same time, it is more dynamic. It's mutable. It need not be recreated. Just more nodes need to be created for additional values to be accommodated and attached to the existing object, which will be less time consuming, which will be needing less efforts, right? And doing the job pretty quickly. Yes or no?
Yes.
So that's array list, correct? Like add, there are other methods you can see. There is add range also. If you have an existing collection to be passed or an array to be passed to create array list, you can use add range. Then there is a default algorithm for binary search. There is clear method which just cleans all the elements and sets the count to 0. Doesn't delete the collection object itself. Contains, this checks for an existence of an element. Copy to allows the array list to be copied to any array, immutable array if you want. right? And then get enumerator is there, which allows for each loop to be used on it. For each loop behind scenes makes call to get enumerator to work. If get enumerator is not there, for each will not work. Correct? Then we have something called as index of, with the help of which we can find the index of the given element at any point in time. Now, like add, we have insert, and like add range, we have insert range. What is this insert? At any given instance index, I can pass the new object. So when I say insert, the elements falling after that particular index location, including that index location, will be pushed down. So 1, 2, 3, 4 is what the status is. If I say arr dot add 2, 5, so the status of the array list will be 1, 2, 5, 3, 4, because 3 and 4 will be pushed downwards after 5. As I said, insert at the index 2. Insert range does the same thing for more number of elements, just like add range, right? Last index of is there. So that looks for the last occurrence of the element in the array list and returns the index of it. Then we have remove. We pass the object, it gets removed from the array list. Remove at is like remove only, but instead of taking the object, it takes in input as index. So if I say remove at 2, means whichever element is there at index 2 will be removed. And that node will be deleted as well. So any elements falling below that specific location will be automatically shifted upwards. There is remove range also. If I want more number of elements to be removed, pass the index, pass the number of elements to be removed. So if I say arr dot remove 2, 2, so it will remove 3 and 4 both. Then there is reverse method also, which automatically reverses the list. First becomes last, last becomes first. Then you have sort also. So by default, it uses bubble sort algorithm behind the scenes and sorts the elements within the list, right? And then there is a method to array, which converts the array list to array, returns array of objects. Then there is trim to size also. So suppose you have removed some elements, not by using remove methods, but just by setting the object value as null to any of the index location, and then you call trim to size. So unused elements will automatically be removed, deallocated, and the memory basically will be trimmed to the actual size of the array. Understood? I mean, based on the
Yes.
count. Let's see by starting this. So count 4, size 6, 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's array list. Clear? Let's move on to our next collection. So comment out the call to demo array list in main. Collapse this demo array list method here. Our next collection type is stack. So I name the method as demo stack. Again, a static void method. I get this method called here in main. And then here I instantiate my stack class. Stack stk equals new stack. I can provide an initial capacity for this as well, just like array list, but similar behavior for most of the collections. See, it's a stack, so I have a method push. I say push 1, push 2, stk.push 3. Once again, I'll use string over here to see if it is supported. Stack.push 4.0d. Quite similar thing I'm doing, what we did with array list. Now, apart from push, what all methods we have here? stk.pop is there, peek is there, as we discussed, and then clear is there to clean the entire stack, right? Then regular methods like contains, copy to, count, property is there, get enumerator is implemented, to array is there, right? Here we don't have any method which tells me the size or capacity at any point in time. Because usually with stack, we never go for some sort of capacity based processing, right? We just process all the elements sequentially from top to bottom, means last to first, correct? Last in, first out. Yes or no? Let's say for each object E and STK, console.writeLine E. Before that, I can display the count. So with interpolated string, I'll say count colon curly brace stk dot count. I copy this line of code. Then here I say stk dot peak. In fact, not this way. I'll put it in a console dot writeLine statement. So console dot writeLine, then stk dot peak. Okay. I want to see the count if it has changed. Then I say console dot writeLine stk dot pop. I want to get this done twice. So again, I say console dot writeLine stk dot pop. Here I put a new line character as well. And then I want to display the count once more with a new line character at the end. What is the predicted output? Here, what will be the count? 3, 4. This is a dynamic collection, so there is no problem with this, first of all. What do you think? What will be the count? Count is
4.
always the number of elements we have pushed. So 4. What will be the output from this for each?
1, 2, 3, 4.
What will be the output here? 4. What will be the output here? 4. What will be the output here? 4, then 3. Then count will be 2. Correct? Have a look at this. Count is 4. Now you said it with for each 1, 2, 3, 4. Is it like that? No, it is always going to be last in, first out. So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, it will be 4, 3, 2, 1. Understand?
Yes.
Yes.
It always starts from the top. Then what is this for? I said peak. What is the topmost element? 4. So it displayed 4. Count is 4. Peak has not removed any element from here. Correct? Then pop, which shows me topmost element, which is still 4. Again pop, which displays 3. And then count, because pop removes the element as well apart from retrieving it back. The count becomes 2. Is it clear? Yes?
So pop will remove from the bottom.
Top only. Whenever it is a stack, it will be always from the top. Last in, first out. If it is from bottom, the output here would have been 1 and followed by 2. Am I getting that? No. I'm getting 4 and then 3. So it is processing from top only.
Last in, first out.
Last in, first out. 4 went in last, so came first. Right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's move on to the next thing. Collapse demo stack. Comment it out here. The next one is queue. Let's have a method static void demo queue. Let's get this called here in main demo queue. Here I create the instance of queue. Queue equals new q3 q dot and q1 q dot and q2 q dot and q3 as string q dot and q 4.0d. This is just to demonstrate that all of these collections are dynamic and at the same time accept values of any type. Right? Now, just like stack, I'm going to do some processing here. We displayed count here, right? So here also I say console.writeLine, interpolated string, count. What should I put? Q dot count. Then I go for each. Object, E for element in Q, console.writeLine, E. Then there is no peak behavior here. I directly have DQ. So couple of times I call DQ. Okay. Console.writeLine, Q dot DQ. I do it 2 times. And then I again display the count. What is the output predicted here? Count is 4. Then what will be the sequence? 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. Q is first in, first out. So it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, right?
Yes.
Then DQ should return me 1. Next DQ should return me 2. And the count should become 2 because there will be 2 elements remaining. Yes or no? Let's see. Count is 4. Then for each 1, 2, 3, 4. Then DQ gives me 1. Another DQ gives me 2. Now 1 and 2 are DQ'd, means removed also, which means only 3 and 4 are there remaining in the queue. Hence the count is being displayed as 2. Is it clear? Is it clear?
Yes.
Let's collapse this, comment demo queue. And our next collection is hash table. Demo hash table. Let's first of all make a call to this demo hash table in main. And then here, let's declare the instance of hash table class ht equals new hash table. This also allows me to provide the initial capacity. Let's say 3. Quite similar behavior, isn't it? Whichever collection you work with. Allows me to say ht.add. Now see, it takes the key and value, 2 parameters, both of type object. Means key can be anything, value can be anything. Let's say the key is integer and the value is 1 as string. ht.add 2, comma two. ht.add. Remember the key needs to be unique. If it is repeated, it will be an exception, runtime exception. Here I say the key is string 3 and the value is numeric 3. ht.add again key becomes integer 4. Probably I can say 4.0d. And here I say 4.0 as the value. I want to display the count. So console.writeLine with interpolated string. I say count, curly brace, ht.count. It has got 2 built-in collections representing keys and values separately as well. Okay, so you can iterate on both sections separately also if required. Is it clear? I want to access one of the element by key. So let's say console.writeLine. Maybe here I can put new line. Then console.writeLine. I want to get the element displayed at or represented by the key 2. I just say ht2. Where this 2 is not indexed, 2 is actually the key. 2 is not indexed, 2 is actually the key. So I should get the output as 2, TWO. If it is index, in that case, it should have displayed me this value 3, right? Then I go for each. Object key in ht.keys. Only keys. Here I want to display the key and value both. So I say console.writeLine, an interpolated string, key, colon, curly brace, key, comma, value, colon, curly brace, ht square bracket key. And here the count is not going to be reduced. If I retrieve, the value is not removed. It is put back into the HT only. I mean hash table only. Or it just reads. It just doesn't manipulate or remove it. Okay, like the stack or the queue. Let's start it and see the output. Or here I get HT2 as TWO, and this is the result of for each. Key 4 value 4.0, key 2 value 2, key 1 value 1, key 3 value 3. This is not sorted. So in random order we are getting it. It applies its own algorithm to set the values at specific locations. Right? There is no default sorting happening over here. Is that clear?
Yes.
And then the last collection. So let's comment demo hash table call. I copy demo hash table method from here, collapse it, and paste the copied content here. And I'll call this as sorted list. What I do is one single change. I replace hash table with sorted list. I keep the object name also same. Everything else I keep same. No change further. Just the type has been changed here. And I make the call to demo sorted list here. Start. See the difference over here and tell me. Okay, there is an exception. Let's see, what is it? Okay, so here the sorting is happening. So that's why it is looking for homogeneous values. I'll just correct it out because string cannot be compared to integer, right? Let's say this is 3 and this is 4. Apart from the data being changed, no other change. Just run it again and have a look at this. Do you see? This time it's in proper order, ascending order. Yes or no? Ascending
Yes.
order of keys. That's what sorted list is. So technically it is hash table only, which is storing the data in sorted format based on the keys. Correct? Sorry. Sorry again. Is this clear?
Yes.
Let's comment this. Let's collapse this. Now, one issue with this kind of approach here is what would happen if I add some logic like this here, where I have int sum equals to 0 initialized, and here I'm saying sum plus equal to e. First of all, this is not possible because e is object, sum is integer. I need to typecast this. So whether I use the old style unsafe typecast or I use convert.toInt32 method, I have to typecast it, right? Compilation time error is removed, but when I run it, most likely it is going to give me an exception. For that, I need to uncomment this. And this is the problem that I'll be having with all the types of collections we have seen. See, 1, 2 it displayed. While processing third element, it just says unable to cast object of type string to int32. What is the reason? Reason is this. THREE3 cannot be typecasted to number 3. Am I right?
Yes.
In this case, what I'm looking for is the homogeneous elements to be used. If I want the array list of integers, it should have only integers as members. If I say it is of date time, it should have all members as date time. If I say it is of type person class, it should have all the elements of type person class. Do you get it? What does that mean? Should I have array list created for each different data type separately? Not really. Because that will be waste of efforts, development efforts, right? So that's where .NET has been introduced with a feature called as generics, which allow me to have one class created in the code, which can provide me the instances of different types at runtime. So that's why we call that class as generic class. One implementation, but behavior is different every time whenever it is used. So what I do is I copy this method demo array list. Before I paste it, I import one more namespace, which we have been using for a while. System.collections.generic. And then this demo array list I copy back over here. I name this as demo generic list. Here in main, I comment this and make the call to demo generic list. And then some changes here. Instead of array list, I say there is a list of type integer. Array list again replaced by list of type integer. So within angle brackets, I'm actually passing the data type as parameter. What type of elements I'm looking for this collection? Got my point? Now see, at compile time itself, it gives me error when there is an incompatible type. I have to go and change this to a compatible type. Even 4.0D, though it is numeric, is not allowed because it is not integer, it is double. And then I don't even need this typecast. And in fact, here also, I can just say this is simply int. I know all elements are of type int, which means no typecast needed. Output will be as array list only. There is no difference at all. I hope you understand that. But the behavior has changed. Compile time checks for the members data type is being done, right? Only compatible types are being accepted. Yes or no?
Yes.
Now I can create list of string by saying list angle bracket string. I can create list of person by saying list angle bracket person. There is no challenge in that. Where the implementation of the class list is just one. But when I create instances, the instances will be created as if they are the instances of different classes. List of int is different, list of string is different, list of person is different class at runtime. Is it clear? Yes.
Yes.
Same way, we have generic stack also. So I copy the static void demo stack method. Paste it here. I name this as demo. generic stack. Make the call to that method in main. Demo generic stack. And here I say stack also receives the parameter for the data type. Stack of int is what I want, which means I cannot pass incompatible data. I have to pass integer only. See, push is asking for integer now. If I say stack of string, it will ask for string only. If I say person, it will ask for the type person only. Understood?
Yes.
And here I can blindly go for int, which is compatible with this or which is same as this. Yes or no? Let's start. And here is the out. Here is the out. The behavior is not changed. Logically, there is no change. It is just more safe usage of the data types. Earlier, heterogeneous items were allowed. Now, the behavior is heterogeneous only, but items are homogeneous of one specific type, right? So based on your need, you can use the generic or non-generic version. Correct? Yes.
Yes.
Let's comment this. Same is the case with Q also. So this time I copied demo static, static void demo Q method. Paste it here. Name this as demo generic Q. Get it invoked in main. And what changes I need to make? Same, like what I did with array list, what I did with stack. So stack and queue are available with the same name, whereas array list has been replaced with list class. Right? Behaviorally, list and array list are same. Let's run this. And there we have the output. Correct? Same is the case with hash table, but there is a name change again. So let's comment this first. I'll copy hash table. Paste it here. Hash table is called as dictionary when it becomes generic. And just to be consistent with the naming, I say generic dictionary. For our understanding, I'm putting this comment hash table. Now this hash table object I replace with the class dictionary. I need to pass two type parameters here, one for key, one for value. Let's say key is going to be of type int and the value is going to be of type string as per my need. Same change on this side. I'm looking for new instance of dictionary of type int comma string size 3. So first two have no problem. Here I have a problem because the key and value are not matching with the types expected. I correct it. Here also I make the correction. I say this is 4 comma 4. Rest everything I keep as it is. Here instead of object I can say int so that there is no problem here. Key is of type int, right? And value is of type string. Get it invoked here. Demo generic dictionary and start. Yes. Likewise, for sorted list, we have sorted dictionary here. Let me copy this one only. Collapse, comment this, then paste. Here, comment will have sorted list. And instead of demo generic dictionary, I'll say demo generic sorted dictionary. And here I say this is sorted dictionary. This is just like sorted list. Okay, so this doesn't support the initial capacity. No problem. I remove 3 from there. Rest all I keep as it is, and maybe I can just make it a random list. So I add 3 first, then 1, then let's say 4 is being added, then 2. Remaining all statements I leave as it is and start. Okay, I didn't make the call or what? Looks like. Yeah. So demo generic sorted dictionary. There is a spelling mistake here. I'll correct it out. Start. See, I provided random values, but still here I'm getting the output in sorted manner, right? With dictionary, that won't be the case. Random values will appear random. With sorted dictionary, you will get it sorted by key. Got it? Yes, everybody? Yes or no?
Yes, got it.
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So time for a break. After the break, we'll then move on to our next section where we'll be having more of a discussion on .NET Core, right? The important elements of .NET Core, including the architecture of .NET Core, then ASP.NET Core, and then little bit of hands-on once again to set up the application, right? So we'll be resuming at 11:05. Okay.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm back. Shall we proceed?
Yes.
Okay. So I hope the concept of collections is pretty clear. Collections and generic collections both. Yeah. So let's move on to our next part, .NET Core architecture. On day one, we discussed about .NET, its evolution, how it all started. We discussed that .NET was planned to be cross-platform framework to counter challenges being received uh, from Sun Microsystems with its Java language, right? Microsoft wanted to
Yes.
be there in the race. But why it got stalled and why .NET became Windows only framework? Because during the development, they realized that it's going to be really, really big platform and there will be lots of features that need to be implemented, stabilized, and for which there will be a number of updates being released in near future. And releasing so many features with their updates very frequently seem to be a challenge for different platforms, right? That is why they took a backstage and decided that let's put the idea of building .NET framework as cross-platform framework on hold. Let's focus on making it for Windows, all versions, all architectures, and stabilize the same first of all, correct? And the good thing that they did was they didn't actually drop the complete non-Windows implementation of .NET at that time. They rather released it to open source community and allowed open source community to work on the different features of .NET framework for non-Windows systems. And that work by the open source community was named as Mono .NET. This was not Microsoft's .NET. This was .NET initially for which the source code or code base was shared by Microsoft, but later on completely developed and taken care of by the open source community, right? A part of that community then formed a company called as Xamarin. The main focus of this company was to allow .NET developers to use their .NET skills to build native Android and iOS applications. For Windows platform, Windows Mobile, the Microsoft's .NET was capable already, but they wanted the same capability to be available for Android and iOS app development as well. If you see Android, the native applications for Android are majorly developed using Java language. And iOS uses either the Swift language or Objective-C language to get native applications developed. And this community was looking at the alternative for the same because there was already a huge developer community of .NET background. And they wanted those people to be able to use their skills to be able to build native Android and native iOS apps. So that's where they formed the company called as Xamarin. And they released some frameworks like Xamarin Monodroid, based on Mono.NET only for Android and hence named as Monodroid. And one more framework called as MonoTouch, again based on .NET framework. And it was basically for the iOS based applications. Later on, this community also introduced a framework which actually was kind of one single unified framework, output of which can be deployed to either Android or iOS or Windows platform. And that was named as Xamarin Forms. And this was the time when Microsoft thought that it's a good time or it's the right time to actually get into the cross-platform arena back. And the easiest way for them was to acquire this Xamarin organization so that they can get the code base, they can get the skill set, they can get the ready engineers who are aware of making the .NET available for non-Windows systems at the same time. Understood? And they merged all of their work into one single platform, which later on they named as .NET Core to start with. So there was .NET Framework, which was Windows only, and then there was .NET Core, which was cross-platform framework, which was a joint effort between Microsoft team and the team that they got by acquiring Xamarin. So the framework was named as .NET Core. Version 1, version 1.1, then version 2, 2.1, 2.2 were released. Then 3, .NET 3, .NET Core 3.0, 3.1 was released. And after which Microsoft decided that let's merge the two different branches of .NET, .NET Framework and .NET Core into one branch and name it as .NET or .NET Platform. So from .NET version 5 onwards, we got single unified model. And that's where they decided that instead of Xamarin Forms, now we will provide a separate framework called as MAUI, pronounced as MOI, which is actually targeting the different app models which can be deployed to Windows, whether it is Windows device-based OS, whether it is laptop or desktop, whether it is server, or probably if I talk about Android or iOS as well. So one same code base is developed along with one same code base for the UI also, and that is then compiled for different devices, different platforms, so that the native output can be generated. So this was a port of Forms to a different framework with more features, not only the business application Forms Windows, but the entire application development was becoming possible with this. Right? So this all came with the target of .NET Core only. Now, what kind of applications .NET Core does support? One is MOI. There is console-based applications. There are Windows applications supported. MOI, in that also Windows-based applications are there, which we usually called as UWP. Right? Then Windows means Windows native applications like typical desktop applications, full-fledged, wherein we have two options. One is of using WinForms framework. The other one is Windows Presentation Foundation Framework, WPF. And then we had the support of ASP.NET platform as well. Within ASP.NET, we got pages with mainly the Razor pages being supported, not the ASPX pages anymore. We had the support for MVC applications, Web API applications, also supported in the same category. And then there were sub frameworks also released like Entity Framework Core or EF Core, which allowed the database communication being done pretty easily with object relational mapping being provided by EF Core. Right? So these are basically the types of applications I would say. Now, components of .NET Core platform, if I talk about, are not different from what we had in the .NET framework. Okay, so it all starts with CLR. CLR has got JIT. The three JIT types that we discussed on day one are applicable for .NET Core as well. Just some improvements have been done. CLR now is more lightweight and more optimized for better performance compared to the .NET framework because the same CLR is being used now on mobile devices as well. So it had to be optimized and it had to be made lightweight. Understand? Same is the case with JIT compilers also. They have been further optimized to perform the best. Then we have base class library. Just like .NET framework. Then the .NET framework itself for .NET Core platform has got a rename called as Core FX, which contains all standard .NET features, right? The base class library contains all the library functionality ready to use features, and the Core FX contain all the toolings. Much more modular, much more loosely coupled set of components you get both in base class library and Core FX. So that you get the option for reducing the size of the application, memory footprint of the application, and make it perform the best. Better diagnostics, better reflection features have been added to the Core FX as well. .NET Core also comes with its own built-in dependency injection engine, which is actually implemented based on the solid principles that we learned in last week. Last week, I would say. Understand? Plus, for ASP.NET platform, the entire hosting model was changed. The dependency of the web applications, which was there on IIS, has been now removed. You can host your applications created on ASP.NET now on IIS or any other web server of your choice. And if no web server is available, probably you can go for self-hosting your application as well. I mean, there are APIs being provided by the .NET framework, which allows your console applications to behave like a typical web server host. So completely new hosting model has been introduced, which is backed up with some of the features like, or rather hosting engines like Kestrel. Right? Which sits on the top of any other web server also, if any web server out of the box being used, IIS, Tomcat Apache, or Java web server, or anyone. Then this framework has been intended to be cross-platform completely. And this is backed up with the support for containerization also. Anybody knows what is containerization or what is container? Docker or something if you have worked with. Let me explain in short. Usual problems that we face with the typical applications is I develop the application, I test the application, it works just fine on my development machine. But when I deploy it to some other environment like testing or staging or production, in one of the platform or maybe more of the platforms, it starts giving troubles, it starts crashing. What could be the reason? Usually the reason is some dependencies may not be available. Some dependencies may not be available with the right version. Dependency is there, but the correct version that is expected by the application may not be there. There could be some OS dependencies missing because of some incompatible service packs being available on development machine and the uh, other environment within which the application is being deployed. There could be some hardware dependency also that is causing the mismatch. To avoid this, earlier we used to create virtual machines. Within that virtual machines, we used to build our application. We used to test the application, and then instead of deploying the application, we used to deploy the VM on the target environment. But you know, the VM is quite bulky in size. The most basic VM itself is of usually 10 GB, 12 GB in size, and the fully capable, full installed VM probably might end up with 30 GB plus in size. Now, deploying so big stuff on the target environment is always challenging, time consuming. Plus, the availability of the hard disk space should also be there on the target environment. So there are a lot of challenges. Then again, who will take care of licensing of the operating system and the other softwares in that VM? That is another challenge. Plus, who will take care of the updates and patches in the softwares in the operating system of that VM? Correct. Plus, whether that VM follows the security standards of the organization within which the application is supposed to be used. That again is a challenge. A lot of auditing needs to be done. So that's where, based on the similar concept, we required a better solution which can make the deployment lightweight. I mean, virtualization is something which is needed at any cost, but not complete virtual machine. We create a shell on the top of whatever is there, and that shell contains all the dependencies that your application depends on, by hiding some of the dependencies which might be being provided by the underlying hardware and the OS. So your application, when deployed, is not the application only being deployed, rather it is deployed along with this shell. And this is the shell which we call as container. Virtual container behaves just like a virtual machine, but it's not a virtual machine. It's just an environment, boxed environment. And hence it is called as container. And sometimes also usually termed as mini or micro virtual machine, because its behavior is just like virtual machine. It creates its own isolation layer like VM, right? So that is containerization. Now, which container tool you use, that depends. It could be anything. It could be Docker or it could be any of the competitor of Docker. Doesn't matter. .NET Core has been built to support any of the containerization platform and tool, right? Plus, the library functionality has been moved into something called as packages, which are managed and maintained by NuGet, the package manager. Now with packaging or packaging tools, the benefit is I need not search for the dependency manually, download it manually, install it manually, then then configure it for my application. Usually if I do that, it's a lengthy process. Plus there will be issues like I've downloaded this dependency which has got 10 more dependencies, and those 10 dependencies further have 5 dependencies each, which further may have their own dependencies. If I try to satisfy this dependency, I have to find out the complete tree of dependency of this dependency itself. Right? So quite time consuming, quite risky. I might end up adding a wrong dependency also, which might be a threat to my application and its security. Correct? So that's where the packaging comes in. I just use a small tool called as NuGet Package Manager, with the help of which, with the help of some keywords, I can search for the dependency I'm looking for from within my application scope itself. And when I say install, actually it just downloads, installs, configures, add as a reference to my application in one single shot. Not only the current dependency that I'm looking for, but it takes care of the entire dependency tree of this dependency. All related, all dependent features are automatically downloaded, installed, configured, and added to the application. And that takes hardly few seconds. Make sense?
Yes.
So overall, the architecture of .NET Core actually emphasizes more on modularity, performance, and flexibility, which makes it highly suitable for a wide range of application types and different deployment scenarios. Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Now let's talk about ASP.NET Core. ASP.NET Core is the framework, sub-framework in .NET which allows web applications development or web-based applications development, right? So practically what is ASP.NET Core? It is the same thing, but being built on .NET Core, it actually becomes a cross-platform, high-performing web framework. Means allows very high-performing web applications and web-based applications to be built with the help of it. Completely built on the top of .NET Core runtime, designed to create the modern web applications and APIs with modern requirements. The architecture of this ASP.NET Core framework itself is structured to provide high flexibility, high performance, and high scalability while catering to or addressing to various application types and the different deployment scenarios. So some of the features of .NET Core will directly be applicable. Now, if I talk about the architectural components of ASP.NET Core framework, it all starts with the request pipeline being modified. A new HTTP request pipeline has been created for .NET Core, ASP.NET Core. What is request pipeline, by the way, and why it is called as pipeline? Pipeline means there are sequence of activities that needs to be carried out on the incoming request before it is actually handled and then prepares the response. This is something which was being taken care of by IAS in the previous .NET framework, which was Windows only framework. And that's why it was tightly coupled to IAS. IAS used to provide different HTTP modules and HTTP handlers in order to get your incoming request pre-processed, like authentication, authorization, caching, error handling, global error handling, I mean, right? All these things were being taken care of by these IaaS HTTP modules on which we didn't have any control. Even if my application didn't have the requirement for authentication authorization, the modules always used to be there. Because if we remove some of the module from the pipeline, it is not only our application which gets affected, rather all the applications running on that server will get affected because the module is tied up to IaaS, the server itself, right? So we didn't have control on this request pipeline. What .NET Core does is it says there is no dependency on modules and handlers. Rather, we have the set of middleware components with the help of which we can compose our own request pipeline as per our need. Understand? So if I need authentication, then only I configure the authentication middleware. If I need routing to be handled, I add routing middleware. If I need caching, then only I add caching middleware. If I need data compression, then only I add data compression middleware. And this is all done at each single application level. It has nothing to do with what the server is going to provide. What that means is that the developers can add, remove, reorder the middleware components to customize the request handling process as per the actual need. I might want authentication to be prioritized at the beginning before doing anything. In other scenario, I might want some of the prerequisite tasks to be executed first and then the authentication should be performed. Like logging, I want to do upfront and then authentication. Request logging, I meant, right? So I can construct my request pipeline the way I want. Is it clear?
Yes.
Because now the construction of request pipeline is possible, independent of the server, right? It becomes more flexible and allows my request to be processed as soon as possible. Because I can have a short request pipeline also created by configuring only the required things instead of configuring everything, right? I already spoke about hosting. Hosting is decoupled from the web application, web server. It runs on the top of something called as Kestrel service. This Kestrel service can be set up within a application of your own. So your own application can behave as a server for your web application. Or else this Kestrel then can start receiving the request from IaaS or Tomcat Apache or any other web server as well, where this Kestrel will be actually working as a reverse proxy, server-side proxy, correct? First, the request will go to your web server. The web server will not do anything but forward that request to Kestrel, and Kestrel will get it executed. That makes your application also much more secure because there will be a two-step operation required before it reaches the request pipeline. The web server doesn't create pipeline for these applications at all, right?
Yes.
Request processing is the next thing. Actual request received and need to be processed. So the request first of all needs to travel through the request pipeline that has been constructed by the developer. So whichever middlewares that have been configured in whatever sequence, in that sequence, all those middlewares needs to be processed first. I mean, those middlewares need to process your request first, and then that processed request reaches the actual handler, right? Then there is a routing system which is required in web applications everywhere now these days, especially if you're working with MVC based applications or API based applications, because your request will come to some virtual URL and that needs to be mapped to some specific handler. It is taken care of by something called as routing, right? Which means full support for controllers, full support for actions is there. In short, full support for model view controller or MVC patterns is there. And then a feature which is inherited from .NET Core, built-in dependency injection system is available here as well. If the application is view-based, there you have the views and the Razor page support as well. If views are not required, independent pages are required, those pages will also be Razor pages. And the views for MVC application will also be Razor views only. For data access and the related requirements, you have Entity Framework Core available here as well. Right? If required, the middleware can be customized also. You can create your custom middlewares as well. As per your need. You can create your own middlewares. For security and authentication, we are not limited to what web server supports because it is based on middleware now. This can be supporting any type of security and authentication services, which may be based on the traditional options like Windows authentication, Forms authentication. Then it can be based on the modern things like cookie-based authentication, JWT authentication, OAuth authentication, etc. And at the end, this is .NET Core based implementation. So virtually I can deploy this application on any platform. Understand?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's see how do we actually set up a .NET ASP.NET Core web application. So let's go to Visual Studio, take a file, new project. Some changes will be required, so don't hurry. Language will be C#. Platform will say all platform, and the application type we will get changed to web. Under web, we do have an option for ASP.NET Core web app. This will be standalone pages based application, but there will be no ASPX pages, XHTML based pages. Rather, it will be based on Razor syntaxes. Razor in itself is a kind of a platform, I will say, which allows HTML, the client side stuff that includes HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, along with the server side stuff that is .NET code to be present at the same place in the same file. And it just knows which code to be processed where. And it also knows how to merge the server side code's output to the client side stuff so that the client receives the process page. Then there is another template called as ASP.NET Core Web App Model View Controller. This will end up creating an application based on ASP.NET Core with MVC framework being used. That applies MVC pattern automatically. Is it clear? So let's select this ASP.NET Core Web App to start with. There is also one more template, ASP.NET Core Empty. In this case, there will be no sample content. You have to set up everything right from the scratch, right from the home page. Whereas here you will get some sample created for you. One more thing to be noticed, all these templates have the tags as C#, Linux, Mac OS, Windows, Cloud, Service, Web. That represents that it's a C# project which can be deployed to any of these platforms, which makes it cross-platform clearly, right? So select this ASP.NET Core Web App template. Next, let's name this as ASP underscore or ASP Net Core, I'll say. Underscore demo app 1. I changed the location this time, though the common location will be Quinnox folder on my desktop demos. In that here, instead of C#, I create a new folder that is ASP.NET Core. And there I create my application. Say next. Just like console application, here also it is asking for if it is .NET 5, I'm looking to create .NET 3.1 or .NET 6 or .NET 7, depending on which Visual Studio version you're using. So I believe for you, it will not be more than .NET 5, right? As of now, I don't want any authentication to be configured, so I keep it none. But then there is a checkbox in a configure for HTTPS. This is a standard practice these days for making your website more reliable. HTTPS means the site and the domain needs to be certified, which is done with the help of some digital certificate, which ultimately is also called as SSL certificate, right? Some certification agency or authority has to allot you that certificate, which they do by scanning, by analyzing your website content. If they find everything okay, then only they give you the certificate. You purchase that, you apply that on your web server's port on which your web application is hosted, and then your application is served on HTTPS channel, secure HTTP channel, I mean. So it is always a good idea to get your application configured for HTTPS right from the beginning when you are just developing the application, so that later on you don't need to make any changes apart from purchasing a valid certificate for your server and installing and configuring it on it. Then there is enable Docker. If right from the beginning where you start developing your application, you want your application should be developed, compiled entirely into the Docker container, you can actually tick this box, but this is not mandatory. This can be done, this Docker integration can be done at any instance of time. Maybe you develop your application, you test your application, everything works fine. Then you enable the Docker support, you test once again, because it will just create the environment based on what is there on your machine. It will 99.99% it will be up and running without any issue. And then there onwards, you just need to deploy your container. And then there is another option, enable Razor runtime compilation. What is it? If you make any dynamic changes to your Razor component at runtime, those changes can be compiled and accommodated into your application without restarting the application process. This will be required in rare cases. So for now, I just keep it disabled. I hope all the options are clear here. Yes or no?
Yes.
let's say create. Close. See how quickly the application got created. If you have worked with older .NET framework based ASP.NET applications, it used to take a lot of time to get the project itself created because there were a lot of dependencies which were being added to your application regardless of the fact whether you plan to use those dependencies or not. In this here, only basic dependencies are added, bare minimum dependencies are added, which are always required to keep your application running. Rest of all dependencies are put in your hands. If you are going to use that dependency feature, add it, otherwise leave it, which makes your application size also very small, very compact. So here you can see dependencies, frameworks. I have the framework support .NET Core, ASP.NET Core. Then if I see there is properties folder in which there is a JSON configuration file launch settings, which has got some settings like if I run the application on IAS, what will be the URL used, what will be the port for SSL in case if HTTPS URL is required. Then if I'm running on IAS Express Edition, usually used by the developers, what is the command? Whether the browser needs to be launched automatically or not, and if there is any environment variable to be used. This is basically setting up the environment like which configuration uh, version should be used. Development configuration, testing configuration, staging configuration, or production. I mean, the config files. There are certain services and features which need to be enabled, disabled in different environments as well. Like in development mode, I want debugging to be enabled, logging to be enabled, or logging to be disabled, debugging to be enabled. But when I go for production, I may want logging to be enabled and debugging to be disabled. So all this is done with the help of environments. And by default, in which environment my application will be launched is decided here. If nothing is provided here, if this variable is missing, it by default goes in production. So for IAS settings, it will by default go in production. For IAS Express, which is used by developers, development environment is configured. If it is not IAS Express, I'm running in a self-hosted environment, then this configuration will be applicable. Understood? Next, we have a folder called as www root, which is having the public accessibility, contains all the static files of your web application, which includes HTML, CSS, JavaScript, everything. So CSS, JavaScript, library is any JavaScript library if you're using. So that contains Bootstrap, that contains jQuery, jQuery validation unobtrusive, by default added. If you want to replace this, you can actually just delete this folder and add a new dependency of your own. Then you have pages, because it's a standard web application we have created, not the MVC one. In MVC, you will have controllers, models, and views folders instead of pages. So any shared code goes in shared, and specific code goes here in individual pages. So you have index.cshtml, which is actually your home page, privacy.cshtml, which represents your privacy policies, error.cshtml displayed in case if there is any unhandled exception, right? Then view imports is all global imports across the application for namespaces. And then view start basically is like some component which is processed first before any of the view or page gets processed. Shared contains your master layout. within this file underscore layout.cshtml, and validation integration is here. So if you want any page to have jQuery based validation to be performed, probably you can just render this component. Validation scripts partial. It's a partial page, not a complete page. Complete page will always start with doc type HTML, HTML tag, and at the end you will have /HTML. Whereas fragment will be just some portion, fragment or partial page. And that's what this one is, right? Then there is app settings.json, which contains your application configuration in JSON format, key value pairs. Then you have startup.cs file, which contains a class called a startup that configures your application's pipeline, request pipeline, all dependencies that are going to be used, right? In short, how your application starts, what environments, what features it uses. So here there is a constructor which is setting up your configuration API to this property configuration. Okay. Then there is configure services method, which is automatically get called first, where you add all of your dependencies. This services is basically your dependency container or IOC container, inversion of control container. You register all of your dependency services here, and those can be resolved in whichever component of your application you want to use it. We'll be looking at this into next session, how to actually create a dependency and use it, register it here, and then resolve it in some component. Then there is configure method, which sets up your request pipeline. So see, here we are checking if the environment is configured to be development, then the developer exception page is supposed to be used. Otherwise, the user exception page to be used. So the middleware is configured here. Anything which says app.use actually is loading a middleware into the request pipeline. The sequence will be whatever is added to the pipeline first will be the first in sequence. Else says use exception handler means show the custom error page instead of developer exception page, right? This is a security feature HSTS. Right now, it's not the right time to actually talk about it. Then HTTPS redirection we opted for because of this module or this middleware component. Even if the request comes to your application on HTTP port, it will be automatically redirected to HTTPS equivalent. Make sense? These days, when you go for a bank website, www.xyzbank.com, automatically it goes to HTTPS only. How? There must be some redirection happening, right? It just checks the incoming request. If it is already HTTPS, then just go as it is. Otherwise, transform that request to work on HTTPS and then go forward. There is another middleware component being added, static files. If this is not added, the contents of www root will not be used. Precisely, the CSS and JavaScript files will not be entertained. They will not be served. This actually sets the static file server for you. Use routing. If it is not configured, the routing module will not work. Means the virtual request will not be mapped to the actual components. With Razor, routing is essential because CSHTML page is not something which your client will understand. Client will always give the request to some virtual URL, which then needs to be mapped to some CSHTML page component, which is done by routing. Use authorization basically adds the middleware for looking at if I have the right permissions or not. Maybe right now I don't need this, so I comment it out. And then we have use endpoints. This is most important. It adds to the routing. Routing will just do the mapping, but actually invoking the handler is performed if and only if the use endpoints method has been called to register the endpoints middleware. So it will take the request from the virtual URL and will do the invocation of the right component, right? Without this, use routing is nothing. And then there is program.cs, which contains main, makes it a console application. Am I right or wrong? This comes into picture when you say, I don't want IIS Express to host my application, but my own application to host itself. In that case, this void main is processed, which builds the configuration system, builds the application runner, runs it. When I call run, actually my application gets hosted. This create host builder is the helper method created here only, where we are saying use the startup as what is defined in the startup class. Understood? Let's run this.
Sanket, can you expand that index.cs HTML?
Yeah, we'll come to that also. So at runtime, this is your index.cs HTML is. I go to privacy, this is privacy.cs HTML output. Back to home, this is index.cs HTML again. Let's have a look at the contents of those two files now. So we saw layout.cs HTML. This content is going to be delivered as it is into all the pages which will be loaded. Now, here we have a call to render body. The moment this is called, that's where the page that has been requested, the content of it are injected here. Rest of the HTML is taken from here only, from this layout page only. Now let's have a look at index.cs HTML. See, it's not starting from doc type. It doesn't have HTML tag, body tag, head tag, anything. Just contains some fragment, right? It sets the model object as index model, basically something that represents data for it. But now this is basically an implicit class automatically created for the page index. And then here you have the content. View data is a component which basically maps this backend code with the front end. View data is something which I can read later on anywhere to process it. This view data right now, if you see, is being actually used in layout. So here somewhere the view data must be being used to set up the title. See here. Right? So whatever title we are setting up here, home page is being set over here when we are on the home page tab. Homepage space dash space ASP.NET Core dash demo app 1 is the title. Title has been set. Privacy policy. This will be appended with this and will get set as title. Understood? So it allows me to have some C# code with @ curly brace symbol. I can have C# code added. Otherwise, this is going to contain all HTML stuff only. There is no XHTML here. Plain HTML and C# code does exist. Page says that it's a page component. Model sets the model object. And within that, then we are setting the view data dictionary. This is actually a dictionary. You can see view data dictionary of type index model. So it holds the title as key and the value as home page, which we are retrieving here. So let's run this again. If I go to home, see first of all the title here. Homepage dash ASP.NET Core underscore demo app 1. I go to privacy. See what came. Privacy policy dash ASP.NET Core underscore demo app 1. And the content has been changed. Your layout remains the same. Only the content here gets changed because when you are asking for any page component, first layout page is processed, and within layout page, wherever render body is called, the body is loaded from the requested page. The output of this is replaced here, or output of that requested page replaces render body. Understand? Yes.
Yes.
Now I go to app settings.json file and add some configuration of my own. Let's say in future, I'm going to plan connecting my application to SQL Server or any other server. It could be some cloud service also, for which I have a connection string to be used that contains all the details about how to connect. So here I add a section called as connection strings. See the name connection strings means there can be more than one connection string because the same application may be connecting to more than one sources. It could be one database, one cloud storage service, maybe queue service, maybe some other service, API or something. So there can be more than one connection strings, right? So collection, hence plural name, which means it will be having some objects configured into it. So curly braces, within that the key value pair goes. So let's say SQL con is the key. This can be anything. As I am defining, it is up to me what key name I want to use. I will just make sure that I use the same key name while retrieving it back. Let's say a dummy SQL Server connection string I give here. Server equals to dot means localhost semicolon database equals to some dummy database. Let's say call this as Quinnox DB. I'm looking for integrated security to be used. So I just say trusted connection trusted underscore connection equals true, followed by multiple active result sets equals to true. This is a parameter which is required in case if you want to run more than one query at a time or one single connection, right? So I've configured my stuff. How do I read this back? Let's say I want to read it back in index.cshtml page. Here, if you see the startup already has got the configuration property created here, right? With the help of this configuration, I can just read it back. So probably I just go to index.cshtml and here I say Okay, wait. This is not MVC view, right? So just give me a moment.
Hello, Sakit, you are not audible.
Yeah, just a moment. I'm just trying out a thing.
Oh, sorry, sir. I thought you were
Yeah,
saying.
yeah.
Just a moment. Hold on. Okay. So to read that connection string with the key SQL con, what I did is here, if you see index.cshtml has got an attached file called as index.cshtml.cs, which contains purely C# code. There, I defined a private member for index model class, private read only I configuration underscore configuration, right? Then this configuration already has been registered here at the framework level itself. So it knows I configuration type, which is what I'm retrieving here via the constructor parameter for index model. So the moment the index model instance is created, this configuration will already have the link to, or will already have the instance of the configuration class, which I'm assigning to this local member underscore configuration. And in onGet method, which comes by default, I just retrieve that connection string by the name SQL con, paste or place that in view data dictionary by calling its add method associated with the key called as constring. And then in index.cshtml, I'm just retrieving it back at view data because this is HTML context, right? Here I needed at the rate to convert the context to the C# context. It's a single line, so I don't need curly braces. I just said read the value of view data constring and display it as the member of H4, as the content of H4. Style color green just to highlight it. It's not mandatory. And when I run it, I do get the output. Yes.
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 So it's all dependency injection we are using. Registration for configuration is automatically taken care of by the framework. The resolution is something that we did here with the constructor based resolution, right? Local member referring to that dependency, the constructor asking for the value which we are assigning to this dependency, right? With the help of that dependency, we called get connection string SQL con. So it automatically went to this section and retrieved this value and added it to view data with the key constring, which we are retrieving here in the view. Got it?
Yes.
Right. So this is how the configuration system can be used. It is connection string. If it is some other section, probably we'll use get method instead of get connection string. For connection string, which is usually required, they have already provided an encapsulated method by the name get connection string. I can virtually read any section. So suppose if I want to read this log level default value, how do I read that? I can say view data dot add log level is the key, comma underscore configuration dot get has got different overloads available with the help of which I can retrieve it, or I can say get a string and then I can specify what I want to retrieve. There could be another method, in fact, dot get section. Yeah. Which section I want to retrieve will be the parameter for it. It's key. The section is logging and then log level, then default. Logging, log level, and default. So here goes logging. There should be no spelling or case mistake. Colon, log level, colon, default. Child elements I read like this. Then I want to get it displayed in index page. Let's copy this. Red color is what I want to use. There I say I want to display the value of log level. Run it. Okay, what's the error? Somewhere I missed something. No. Save. Is it running somewhere? Yeah. It actually retrieved the configuration section object. So maybe I need to further say dot get value. Why not say get value directly here then? Don't we have it? Okay. Have. So what's wrong? Yeah, here it is. So directly get value of type string is what I specified. Now see logging log level default. If I go back here, logging, then in log level, then in default, what is the value? It's information. So I retrieved it. Right? Get section gives me the object of section class, config section class. Whereas get value gives me the direct value. Understand?
Yes.
Any questions here? So that is it for today. In the next section, we'll be taking this further, where we'll be throwing some light on the MVC application as well. We'll be trying to build a sample application which does some database communication also, right?
Yes.
So further use of the app settings we'll be looking at there, and we will be looking at the EF core implementation as well. And if time permits, in the next session itself, I'll show you how to work with the dependency services. So effectively, the use of configure services we will understand. Understand?
Yes.
Okay, so that is it for today. See you next on Friday, 9:30 a.m. Right?
Yes, sir.
Bye bye till then.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
Thank
recording
you.
will be available in the same channel again.
Thanks.